All right, good afternoon. It's the March 29th online hangout for engineering ethics at NJIT. We are now in lesson 10, and this is the research week. The plan for this hangout is really just to talk about all the detailed requirements for your research project for lessons both 10 and 11. It shouldn't take the whole hour and a half. It should be pretty quick, but I just want to go over the details, especially with the annotated bibliography. There's a lot of specific things you have to do for this assignment, and I just want to make sure that all the requirements are clear so that you know what to expect. If you've already turned in your assignments and you want to revise them, you can revise them. You can resubmit your posts up until Friday when they're due. So you can do revisions until Friday. But then after Friday, whatever you've submitted sticks. So I'll go over all the instructions in detail today. So hopefully you know everything that's going on. And that's all I'm going to talk about. I will also be in lecture tonight in the live lecture. And I'll be talking about some other things, mostly network theory. So if you're interested in network theory, chaos theory, come talk with us during the live lecture. And I'll just talk in this hangout about all the requirements for the research project this week and next week. All right, there's some questions in the chat. Kevin's asking if there's a final for this class. There is not a final for this class. There's no final, there's no other exams. Week 15, the lesson 15, it's not even a full lesson. Lesson 15 is just a sort of what did you learn for the semester lesson. It's worth 100 points. So it's worth a full week's lesson, but your requirement is just to write a normal length post discussing what you found valuable in this class. And then once you do that and you fill out the evaluations for the instructor in the course, that's it. Is there a Friday lecture for this week? As of right now, I'm planning to be in class on Friday. If that changes, I'll let people know by Thursday. I plan on being in class on Friday, so you can come to class to get the credit for attendance if you want. But remember, attendance is never mandatory, so that's just up to you. Any other questions before I jump into the research project? If you have questions, go ahead and leave them in the chat or leave them on the Hangout webpage. Get them to me some other way. All right, let's go ahead and jump into the lesson. Yeah, so we're on lesson 10. This is the research week. You should have a case that you want to study. You're going to be using the same case for both lessons 10 and 11, so you don't need to pick two cases. It's just one case. And you're going to give it a thorough treatment over both of these weeks. So in lesson 10, remember, this is supposed to be the fact-finding week, where you're supposed to present the case and all the relevant facts of the case that you need to know in order to give an analysis. And then next week, for week 11, you'll give your analysis. So for lesson 10 and 11, your posts should be normal length posts, about 350 words as the minimum requirement. In lesson 10, I want you to describe all the facts relevant to the case, including the historical context, the socio-political context if it's relevant, any people involved, any companies involved that are players relevant for understanding the event. What went wrong? What were the consequences of what went wrong? Who was responsible, if it's obvious just from the facts about who was responsible? And then what the consequences were, what happened as a result. Were there any legal cases? Were there court cases? Were people put in jail or fined or whatever? Just put out all the facts here. And then the ideas for next week, you're going to be talking about an ethical analysis, right? What went, not just what went wrong, but why did it go wrong? Who was responsible and why? What ethical obligations or duties did they fail to meet? What considerations did they fail to make in creating this error? Right, so this week I want you to just talk about the facts, and then next week I want you to explain why it happened and give it a moral analysis. But this week should just be the facts. It should be a neutral presentation of the facts. You should set it up with some mind of what you want to talk about next week. But right now it should be, you can think of yourself as just a reporter of the facts, just the facts. And then lesson 11, you'll go over the ethical details, and I'll say a little bit more about that next week. The big requirement For this week, that makes it a little bit different from normal weeks is that I'm asking you to do real research, library research. And in particular, I'm asking you to come up with, over the course of both weeks 10 and 11, I'm asking you to come up with 4 primary sources for your research. So I say 4 primary sources, and let me be clear about this. They don't all have to be primary sources. At least 2 of them can be scholarly articles, or in some cases, long-form investigative journalism. So let me just go over these things in a little bit more detail. So a primary source. Oh, that didn't take me anywhere. There used to be a link here about what a primary source is. Maybe I'll fix that link. Let me talk to you just briefly about what a primary source is. A primary source is the original source, or the ground evidence, some artifact or document describing the information from some authoritative source. So there's a couple of different kinds of primary sources. One primary source are original documents. If there's a court case or if there's a federal investigation, the reports that are issued by those investigations count as original sources. Any archival footage, video footage, or photographs, those can count as primary sources. Any interview with important players in the event, especially in the run-up to the event or explaining what happened during the event, those interviews also count as primary sources. So sometimes primary sources are reports or government documents, legal documents, court cases, the official documents from court cases, or evidence used in court cases. Right? These all count as primary sources. The difficult one are investigative journalism. So in my requirements here, I'm allowing investigative journalism to count as one of your main sources. And investigative journalism isn't just any news media report. Investigative journalism requires original fact-finding in the sense that it's discovering new information that isn't available anywhere else. So one way of doing that is through interviews. So sometimes you find interviews in popular media sources, and you can't get statements from these important figures, politicians or CEOs or whatever. You can't get these statements in any other source. These sources come from the journalist, from the media article. Then that would count as a primary source. If you're using that source for that quote or for that interview, then that would also count as a primary source. Sometimes investigative journalism does turn up primary documents also. So if you remember the Ford Pinto case, there was that Mark Dowie article where Mark Dowie discovered these documents inside Ford about the cost-benefit analysis. Right. So that's a case where this journalist found some primary source and then published it in their article. In those kinds of cases, an article in popular media, in the popular press, would count as a primary source. Most media sources, most articles that you find on CNN or on the New York Times or wherever, most of them are not long-form investigative journalism articles. Most of them are just reporting on some event that happens, not with primary sources and not with original documents, but just in order to announce the news or to report on the news. If it's just a news report, then that's not a primary source, and that will not count as one of your 4 primary sources. It needs to be an investigative journalism article where that article is coming up with new source information. Does someone have a question? Hello, LaToya.
Hello.
Did you have a question?
No, I
Okay.
just joined.
No problem. I'm going to go ahead and mute you. Yeah, oh, there you go. Good. Thank you. Yeah, so please check to make sure that your articles are primary sources. If it's a government report or a court document, then that counts as a primary source. You don't have to worry about that. But if it's something from the media, something from New York Times or CNN or Newsweek or something like that, make sure that it's not just one of their normal articles. Make sure it's an investigative journalism article where you're getting new information that isn't available anywhere else. The one exception to primary sources that I'm allowing for this research project are scholarly journal articles. So scholarly journal articles published in some scholarly magazine Those typically are not primary sources because those typically aren't the original sources of information. Those typically use that information to give some analysis, but that's fine. I will let you use a scholarly article if it's a published, peer-reviewed scholarly journal article. I'll let you use that instead of a primary source in order to do your analysis, right? So sometimes these journal articles can be good sources of analysis, but that's the only exception to the primary sources. If you're using a popular media article, it has to be either a primary source or some sort of investigative journalism. The really big and easy and obvious exclusion from these sources are things like encyclopedia articles, Wikipedia. Wikipedia is not a primary source. Wikipedia is never a primary source. So let's say you're doing the Chernobyl disaster. So there's lots of information in the Wikipedia article, lots of good information. In fact, the Chernobyl article is a locked article. You can see up here in the corner this little lock symbol means that this article is locked by the Wikipedia mods, which means that it's in a good enough state that they don't want it to be messed up by vandals. So you can't, not anyone can manipulate this article, which means it's in a pretty good state, which means that the article is somewhat reliable. So there's lots of good information in this article, and feel free to use the information in this article. If you do use the information in a Wikipedia article, then you have to cite it. You have to tell me that you're using this article in your research. But this Wikipedia article does not count as a primary source. It does not count. It's not an investigative journalism article. This is not the primary source for any of these, any of this material. With some exceptions, some of these images might themselves be primary sources, but these images are not from Wikipedia. These images have other sources, and you'd have to cite the place where the image is from. If you're doing something like Chernobyl, I encourage you to use Wikipedia, but it's not one of your primary sources. In order to find primary sources, go to the bottom where they have the citations for this article. Most of these are primary sources or scholarly articles that you can use as part of your research. Not all of them. So like this first article is Fukushima as bad as Chernobyl. If you go to this is a bbc.co.uk article. This might have some information in it, but none of this is primary source information. So you might use this article again. And again, if you use this article, and by use I mean if you just look at it in the course of your research, even if you don't quote from it, even if you don't cite anything from the article directly, if it's one of the resources that you use in putting together your research, go ahead and cite it, just throw up a link. It doesn't have to be a complete citation, just make sure that you recognize that it helps you in your research. But this kind of thing would not count as a primary source. But if we go back here, here's so this is a table. This is a table from a government report, the UNICEF, WHO report on Chernobyl. This is a government document. This is an institutional document that actually goes through a lot of details of the case. This is definitely a primary source. In fact, these are the kinds of resources that you want to find in order to get research on your article. This is going to be the primary source for a lot of information that you find in other sources, right? So most news articles are going to be using data, using information that they get from these kinds of primary sources. So this is a good primary source. I would very much encourage you to use a source like this if you're doing a Chernobyl article. And in general, whatever event you're doing, whatever case study you're doing, look for these kinds of primary sources, especially these government documents that go over the event and the aftermath. They're very valuable sources of information. The investigative journalism part is tricky. If you have questions about the article that you want to use, let me know. It's often the case, though, that most popular media articles in Newsweek or whatever, most of those are not investigative journalism articles. There are some exceptions, but they're rare. So your best bet is to look for scholarly journal articles published in some academic journal or primary source documents, government documents. Other sources don't count. News reports, private websites, typically are primary sources. This is one of the problems I have every year, is that lots of students use things like history.com. So history.com has lots of information on it also, and we can do, if I search for Chernobyl. I'm using Chernobyl a lot I would encourage you to not use Chernobyl because a lot of the students will use Chernobyl. But if you do an internet search on Chernobyl, you might turn up this site on history.com. There's a lot of good information on this also. But again, none of this is primary source information. If you use this source as one of your 4 sources, you're going to get marked down because this is not a primary source. This is information compiled from primary sources. And so if you want to use this, you need to track down the primary sources. But none of this is good for a research project. This is not appropriate for academic research. You want primary documents, you want other scholarly articles. Do not use history.com as one of your sources. Also, because a lot of students do this, if you're doing either Chernobyl or the 3 Mile Island disaster or Fukushima, all of these things might lead you, if you're doing an internet search, to worldnuclear.org. Worldnuclear.org has lots of information about has lots of information about nuclear disasters in the past, and some of it is very, very detailed. So here's their Chernobyl accident website. It has a nice, simple overview, and then it has an incredible amount of detail of exactly what went wrong in a technical sense, and lots of facts and figures about what happens in the aftermath. This is a great resource for learning about what happens in Chernobyl, and I'm quite sure that a lot of people who are doing this kind of research project on this case will find this website useful. But let me stress one more time that this is not a primary source document. This is effectively an encyclopedia article. It's meant to help people understand what's going on, but this is not the primary source for any of this information. Right? This is a compilation of information from other sources that are compiled into this document to help as basically an encyclopedia article. It's very detailed, and if you want detailed information about some of what's going on, undoubtedly you would be helped by using this source. Again, if you use this source, even just to read and to look at, to help you understand, even if you don't quote from this source at all, if you use this source in any way, just reading it, please cite it in your bibliography. You don't have to give it a complete citation. Just note that this is one of the websites you used. Maybe include a link to the website, just so I know that where you're getting your information. But this is not a primary document. If you want a primary document, go again to the end. And this is a general strategy whenever you're doing research. If you find one of these secondary documents, an encyclopedia article, whatever, scroll to the end, find where they're getting their information. And in fact, you see here that they're getting their information from a lot of government-issued reports, other scholarly articles, and you can, this article in the worldnuclear.org website, this is a good article partly because it sources all its information, and you can check where it's getting the information. You can go back to these primary documents and look it up yourself to make sure that it's accurate. This is why it's important to do an annotated bibliography. To do a bibliography in general, to cite your sources, it helps other researchers who are looking at your writing know where you get your information so they can check your work also. It makes the data that you're presenting a lot more valuable because it's corroborated with these other sources, and someone who's reading your essay can use these other sources that you're making available to check your work and to explore further. And that's what the World Nuclear Association website does. This is why it's a good resource. But you shouldn't use this as a primary resource. This is a jumping off point for your own research. If you want to do your own research, you got to go to the end to its sources and track those sources down. So if I see anyone appealing to worldnuclear.org as one of their primary sources, you're going to get marked down for that also. One of the best sources to look up this information is the Njit Library. You can do a lot of this research online, although some of the documents you might use might be at the library itself. You have to go there to look at the documents themselves. Another great resource is scholar.google.com. Oh, someone have a question? Okay. So scholar.google.com. If you don't use this, this is a great resource for scholarly research. This won't just pull up anything on the internet. This will pull up just things specific to scholarly journals. It also goes over court cases, which might be helpful for for this project. So if we look up Chernobyl, notice that we get lots of citations to court cases, legal cases. Maybe I want to actually take out the court cases because just look at the articles. Right, so these are all published in academic journals. Some of these are books that you might use also. If you use a book, you might have to go look it up online or at the library. So one trick is for your research. So let's say I was going to use this source. Here's the source. That's the title, and there's the authors. And here's the rest of the information. So I can use this to put together the citation. But Google does this for you. So if you're using Google Scholar, if you have a source that you want to use, you can go here. If you click on more, it has a little link to cite, and this will pull up a full citation of for that article. So you can just copy and paste the citation right into your bibliography. This is the full APA citation. Please use the APA citation. Don't use MLA. I probably won't mark you down if it's MLA, but I would prefer it to be APA citations if you can. APA citations include the author's names, the date, the title of the article, and then where it's published, and then any of the publishing information, including page number, volume number, and so on. If it's a book, the citation also includes the press that published the book. Make sure you give me a full APA citation. One common mistake that lots of people lose points for this. So sometimes you get a full citation. I'm just using this as an example so you can see what a bad citation looks like. Sometimes when you pull citation for a paper, you get something like this. So Google doesn't always give you the correct citation. It gives you the citation that it can figure out given the information that it knows. This is not a full citation. There's no year. It doesn't have all the authors. It doesn't have where it's published or anything like that. This is not a complete citation. If you were to put this, this would lose points because it's not a complete citation. One of the things, I'll just write it up here, one of the things that I sometimes see from students, because Google turns this up when it's trying to automate the citations, if sometimes when Google can't figure out what the citation is, it'll put a little n.d. ND means no date, or it means that you don't know what the date is. Sometimes you'll see something like this, where it's ND afterwards. That also means things like it doesn't know what the publisher is. This little ND means that whatever is putting the citation together doesn't know what all this information is. This is not acceptable for your own citations. This means, and what this means is that you didn't actually put together a citation, you just copied and pasted, and you weren't actually checking it. You need to do a full citation, which means you need to have the date, the publisher, and all the relevant information for a complete APA citation. If the citation that you have has a bunch of NDs in it like this, that's not a complete citation, and that's going to lose points. So make sure that your citations are accurate. It's an important part of this project. So in addition to getting your 4 primary sources and getting your citations correct, I'm also asking you, and this is the last big part of this aspect of the project, I'm also asking you to do an annotated bibliography. So not just the citations for your sources, but also to include an annotation. So an annotation looks like this. Here's a little selected annotation. So here you see that there's the full APA style citation, author, year, title, where it's published. But in addition to the full APA citation, there's also this little paragraph underneath that explains what is in the book. In particular, it explains what value that book has for the rest of the research project. Right. So this is what I want you to do with your sources. Right. So you have to put together 4 primary sources. You have to give them full citations, and then I also want you to give them a little annotation, something like 100 words, just a short paragraph. And then I want you, in that short paragraph, I want you to explain what information you get from that source, why you can't get that information from anywhere else. Is it a primary source for that information? And then what information did you get, and how is it valuable in the rest of your research project, right? What insight did this source give you that was valuable for the rest of your research? It's important that every one of your you don't just find sources because you're looking for something that talks about your case. I want you to find sources that actually give you useful information about your case. So your annotation should explain what exactly you found useful about that source and why it's included in your bibliography. So this annotated bibliography, 4 sources total with annotations. I'm making this annotated bibliography count as your quiz credit for this week. So normally quizzes are worth 20 points. There's no quiz this week. As you see, there's just the discussion. The 20 points of your quiz is going to be given on the basis of your annotated bibliography. And just to be clear, let me go ahead and show you how I'm grading this. So this is the grade rubric for just the annotated bibliography portion of your grade. So actually, before I do this, let me go back to the assignment. So what I'm asking you to do is write your post as a normal length post, 350 words. In the first reply to that post, you should post your annotated bibliography. Right? So copy and paste your annotated bibliography as the first reply in your thread. So you have your post. It's a normal post, and then the first reply in that thread should be your annotated bibliography. It doesn't have to be the complete annotated bibliography. You only need to include 2 of your sources with annotations, and then 2 this week and 2 next week. It doesn't have to be 2 that it doesn't have to be the 2 that are in your article. You don't have to only restrict your post to only using 2 of these sources. You can use all 4 sources in your post. I'm just asking that 2 of the annotations are done this week and 2 of the annotations are done next week, so you don't have to do all of that in 1 week. The annotation should be the first reply in your thread, and then I'll put the quiz grade that you get for your annotated bibliography as your score for that reply. Okay, now let me go ahead and return to the, rubric. Okay, so for your annotated bibliography, it's 20 points for each lesson. So 20 points for lesson 10 and 20 points for lesson 11. And I'm only going to be looking at 2. So you can go ahead and post all 4 of your annotated bibliography, all 4 of your annotations, but I'm only going to be grading 2. And here's how I'm going to be grading it for each lesson. And here's how I'm going to be grading it. 5 points of that 20 points. So there's 2. There's 2 sources for each of these 20 points. You might imagine this broken up in half, but 5 points of that 20 points are for the correct citation that's actually an APA style. 5 points if it's actually a primary source or a scholarly article. So if you use Wikipedia or some other encyclopedia, if it's not a good source, then I'll take off 5 points for your annotated bibliography for each source. So if both your sources are no good, then that's minus 10 points. And then 10 points total for the quality of your annotation. Is your annotation actually explaining why that source is valuable? Right? Sometimes people just you might just say, I like this source, this is a good source. That's not enough of an annotation, and you're going to lose points here for that. So you need to have the correct APA citation. It needs to be a good article, an article appropriate for this kind of research, and then you need to give a good annotation. And that's how your annotated bibliography points are going to break down. There seems to be some questions. Let me see what's going on here. Someone can't see anything. You can't see anything in this window. If you can't see anything in this window, you might just need to restart maybe Chrome. Maybe restart your whole Chrome browser. That might help. I don't think anyone else is having that problem, so that might just be your computer. Are there any other questions about the annotated bibliographies or anything else about the research?
I got a question.
Yeah, Kevin.
For the annotated bibliography, you said that you could put all of them in the first reply, but for week 10, right? But week 11 is a different type?
So my requirements is just 2 full citations with annotations each week. If you put all 4 in week 10 and then just copy and paste all 4 again in week 11, that's also fine. But I'm only going to grade the first 2 in week 10, and then I'll grade the second 2 in week 11.
Oh, okay. So it's going to be the same for week 10 and week 11, the annotated bibliography.
Yeah, that's right. You need 4 sources total for both weeks. So
Yes.
if you only do 2 in one week and only do 2 in the next week, that's fine. If you do all 4 and then just copy the whole 4 again in week 11, that's also fine. As long as I have 4.
4 in total.
Yeah.
Okay.
In fact, let me go ahead and show you an example of a student who's already turned in their work and did a good job. Let me make sure. Yeah. So this is Shivani from section 456. She already turned in her work. I'm showing you the non-graded version of this, so you don't see her grades. But I just wanted to give this an example of a good post, but also the kinds of annotated bibliography I want to see. So she gives her discussion, gives some facts about the case, and then in her first reply, right? So this is also Shivani, same reply. She gives the sources that she's using, and here she's 3 sources. So she needs 4 total, and my grade here would only be for the first 2. But here she has the title of the article, and then she has the annotation, and then she has the complete APA-style citation. Notice that the citation is complete. Right? There's no NDs or anything like that. This is the complete citation. And she also included the link to the article, and this is very important to make sure that I can look at the article myself, to read it myself. So this is, especially for this annotated bibliography section, this is exactly what I want to see. It's very clear how this bibliography is structured, how it relates to the rest of her article. I'm just using this as a sample of the kind of thing that I'm looking for. Shivani only posted 3 sources, so in lesson 11, she's going to have to post at least 1 more source with annotations for full credit. But for lesson 10, this should receive full credit when it's graded, or this is what I'm looking for full credit. Someone asked, I think on the website, if I can post the breakdown again. Yeah, this is just a breakdown for the annotated bibliography. I should also put here that post is worth 80 points. So 80 points for your post, that means 72 points is equal to 90%. 54 points is equal to 80%. So if you're receiving over 72 points, you did well on your post. If you're receiving over 64 points, then you at least met the minimum requirements in your post. And it goes down from there. So I'm just letting you know this. I'm grading it mostly by the same kind of grading system that I use for normal weeks. I'm looking for the amount of effort you put in, that you're clear, that it's clearly written, clearly presented, that it's clearly your own original work. I'll go ahead and mention this very clearly right now, that for lessons 10 and 11, I do considerably more work checking for plagiarism than I do in other weeks. And I should say that I do check for plagiarism almost every week. It's pretty obvious when people are just copying and pasting from online sources. And I've already caught several students in all of the sections this semester. In every one of my sections, I've already caught several students who have plagiarized, some cases more egregious than others. And when that happens, I tell the dean of students, and you go on the dean's watch list. So it's never a good idea to plagiarize, but for this assignment especially, I check very carefully for plagiarism. And what that means is that I usually go through their sentences and I do a Google search for them to see if anyone else is using the same sentences, in which case this counts as plagiarism, and I report it to the dean. The syllabus policy is that the first instance of plagiarism will be reported to the dean and get 0 credit for the assignment. So it's a serious offense. It has serious consequences. Please do not plagiarize. It's also a lot of work for me, a lot of paperwork for me, a lot of paperwork for the dean. You'll have to go to a few meetings with the dean. So it's not worth it to anyone to plagiarize. Please do not plagiarize for this assignment. With that, I guess I'll go ahead and give the word of the day. The word of the day today is annotation. Annotation. If you type the word annotation into the sign-in sheet for today, you will get attendance credit for today. While you're doing that, I'll go ahead and say that a lot of students sent me emails over the last 2 days after I sent out the grade report. And I'm still catching up on those emails. I'm still a little bit behind on grading for the last 2 weeks. This week has been pretty hectic for me. So I'm almost done with this online hangout, and then I'm going to go back to grading. Hopefully your grading is caught up by this week, and hopefully I can catch up on some of these emails by the end of today. If you're worried about grades that haven't been put online yet, don't worry about that too much yet. If they're not up online by Friday, then send me an email again reminding me. But until then, just go ahead and wait until Friday. But there were a couple of the students who had other kinds of questions, and I'll try to get to those today. Especially if you have a question about your research project, if you have a question about sources that you want to use, send me an email and I'll look over them and I'll let you know what I think. Yeah, I'm going to penalize 5 points if you don't have your annotated bibliography as the first reply in your thread. This is just to make sure that you're following the rules. And then syllabus policy is very strict. Your research is worth 80 points. You're still required for this week to do your 3 replies as normal every week, 10 points each. And then your annotated bibliography is worth 20 points. If you haven't picked a case, here's a bunch of cases, and there's lots of other cases that you might want to consider. I'm pretty open about the cases that I'll allow, but if you have any questions, let me know. Try to pick a case that's aligned with your own interests, maybe your career trajectory, because the more interested you are in the project, the better your project will be. And then lesson 11 is just the ethical analysis. I'll talk a little bit about this next week, but it's pretty straightforward. The format for next week is going to be the same as this week, including posting the bibliography as the first reply, which will get 20 points again. Next week, because things are pretty much the same, I also have an extra credit opportunity. This extra credit opportunity will be open for the rest of the semester, so you don't have to complete it next week, but it's posted in the lesson 11 discussion forum. I think that's all I want to talk about in this online hangout. Let me check online to see if there's any more questions. If any students have any questions, please let me know. Send an email, leave a comment in the online hangout.
I have a question.
Yeah, Kevin, go for it.
For lesson 10, the replies for lesson 10, we still do those?
Yes, you do 3 replies for lesson 10, 3 replies again for lesson 11.
Oh, okay. All right.
Yeah, again, the replies, it's just to engage the cases. We've done a lot of these case studies. Some of the case studies that the students will turn up will be very interesting. Ask questions to make sure that you understand what's going on, and just sort of chat about it. I'm not looking for sort of deep thoughts. I'm just looking for you to engage the material. So hopefully by the end of these 2 lessons, not only have you gone in depth into your own case study, but you've also looked at a couple of other cases and gotten some sense of the larger context. By the end of this research project, hopefully we've gone through several major cases over the semester that helps you understand both the ethical challenges of engineering and the consequences for the business world. All right, I'm done. Thanks everyone for showing up. Hope to see some of you at the live lecture this evening. Otherwise, good luck on your project. See you.